Student housing is such a unique industry. The more unique an industry is, the more important it is for that industry to have a resource and a platform to share ideas and data, to determine best practices, and a platform to simply promote networking among the professionals in that industry. That's what we are setting out to provide with Student Housing Insight. But what's even more unique about the student housing industry is how unique those professionals are. They want to make a positive impact on the students and the university communities they serve. They understand they have an opportunity to touch the future. They come to work every day looking for ways to make that future bright. If you're one of those people, come be a part of Student Housing Insight. Well, welcome to May's Shop Talk. Today's May 22nd, 2025. Got a lot of stuff to go over today. Thanks so much for joining us. I know it's a busy weekend and everybody's getting ready to take off for maybe a little extended stay or maybe even a little bit longer over the Memorial Day weekend. So thanks so much. So if this is your first time joining us, welcome. For those that don't know me, I am Wesley Dees. I'm the CEO of Student Housing Insight, and we host this each month for the student housing industry. So thanks so much for joining in. And yeah, we've got a lot to get into. So let's go ahead and jump into it. But if you want more information on Student Housing Insight, go to our website at studenthousinginsight.com. Look, we've got a lot of different things that we're going to be going over today, a lot of different panelists on today. We want everything. We want you guys to be able to be interactive with this. You see the chat and people commenting. Thanks so much for that. We want to make it interactive. If you don't see the chat, it should be on the right hand side of your screen. For some screens, it's on the lower part. But tell us who you are, where you're watching from, and if you work for an operator or a vendor, would love to know who you're with. So great. Also, if you've got any questions, put those in the chat as well. Just put a Q in front of it so that I can recognize it as a question that we can pop up for our panelists to be asked. Well, guys, with that housekeeping taken care of, let's go ahead and jump to our first segment, which is the policy and legislative updates from NMHC. And joining us today to go over that is Dave Borzos. Dave, how are you?
I am great, Wes. How's it going?
It's going fantastic. It's I'm a little surprised to see you wearing some outerwear being in DC in May, but I trust it's not that gloomy.
Well, I'll tell you, we've had some great warm weather in the last couple of days, and I think we moved to no disrespect to those in the state of Washington, but it's just been rainy and drizzly and kind of in the 50s and maybe low 60s. So yeah, it's certainly turned. So hopefully Memorial Day weekend I'll kick this off and we'll see some warm weather coming up here. But yeah, it was. I walked out of the house and said I need to put something on today. So, not a good start, but we'll hope for the best. So need a little sun dry out here.
Well, hey, we had a lot of stuff that we went over last month with you.
Yeah.
I know there's been news today that we've got a big, beautiful bill that's going through the House. I don't know if you've got updates on that or.
Yeah, I do. As a matter of fact, like as we talked about last month, nothing ever changes here in Washington, D.C. It just kind of all stays the same. But and if you think that's the truth, I think you need to look somewhere else. Honestly, it never ceases to amaze us, the amount of stuff going on here. So yeah, the big, beautiful bill, interesting name, after a marathon session of 20 hours. I feel sorry for the people writing this, but having to sit in a room and negotiate some of these elements over
Right.
20 straight hours. And it's a godforsaken huge bill, and my colleague who also helps run student housing for NMHC, but he also wears another hat, which is taxes, has been knee deep in all that stuff. And so what happened that came out of that, from a real estate perspective, again, we can get excited. The House passed something. It's got to go over the Senate, right? We got two different chambers, and we'll see what happens when it goes to the Senate, because we do think some of the provisions that got passed in the House that I will describe, may be at risk for either deletion or to change, right? So giving you a couple of highlights that we were, looking for in terms of extending some of the tax provisions from 2017, including some of the 20% deductible for pass-throughs, the maximum tax rates, and other things of that nature. For those of you who are estate planning, that also was positive outcome. There are bonus depreciation for those of you buying assets was bumped up to 100%. There are certain provisions from a investment perspective. LIHTC got some favorable treatment for those of you who are now also straying over into the multifamily sector, and maybe doing some of that as well. And then the last thing, which in 2017 was kind of a groundbreaking thing, which is opportunity zones. And I know that some people in the student housing industry got to take advantage of some of the special treatment there. We got a 2.0 opportunity zone, so that actually is, may be beneficial for spurring even more development as well. So a lot of positive aspects of it. So a lot of that talks about tax. And the other thing about a huge, act like this is that you get to stuff things in there, right? When they first sat down, and why it took 20 hours, there were 500 amendments that were being considered. And going through, I can guarantee they were not going through them line by line. There's a lot of things that get struck, but 500 amendments is just mind-blowing in terms of thinking about having to deal with that. But one of the things that was actually positive, but again, I little temper this until we go through the Senate, happens to do with artificial intelligence, which is certainly a big deal. You've talked about it here on Shop Talk, and we've, I think everybody in the industry is certainly looking at that. One of the challenges is that lots of local jurisdictions across the country are looking at any odd form of AI and potentially passing some form of rule or regulation around that. And inserted into this reconciliation package was a 10-year window where localities and states were barred from passing any legislation that would negatively impact or restrict the use of AI. So pretty big deal. If they can get through the Senate, I think it's extremely positive for our industry, extremely positive for a lot of the work that's being done within our industry. So stay tuned on that one, right? All the other tax stuff you may or may not be interested in. This one was a really good one. So stay tuned on that. We'll give an update next month when we do that, and let you know kind of where it went in the Senate.
Great.
Another thing that may be of interest for people as they think about their investors and kind of benchmarking their buildings' performance, there is a push by the Department of Energy to get rid of Energy Star. And, Energy Star has been this long-standing voluntary program that's been run by the government, kind of as the central hub of this, but there is a push right now, and we are part of a coalition to say, look, this is exactly how you should put together these kind of programs, because it's voluntary, it's not mandatory, and a lot of people use that to kind of benchmark how their buildings, and especially if you've got overseas investors, or even domestic ones who are interested in kind of their building's performance as it pertains to energy consumption, this is an important thing. And so it is something that we are working across some of the other trade organizations to kind of help inform both congressional members, but also the agency responsible for that this is important to keep. And so these are kind of things that we continue to push on. Great. So yesterday we had a meeting with the director of FHFA, and we, it was kind of here's what's going on. Here's some things that we thanked him for some of the regulations that they had pushed on, and some of the things they had rescinded, which was fantastic. I will tell you, if any one of you have attended a recent meeting where people were concerned about, privatization or releasing the enterprises from conservatorship, I think everybody's thought process that would be not something that the president's really focused on right now. Doesn't mean that he hasn't thought about it and hasn't talked about it, but it was more than likely going to be something that would be pushed off in the future. So last night, since a lot of people in the administration and a lot of people, the agencies who run them, including the head of HUD, the head of HFA, and the president, tweet a lot of information. And last night, the president put out a tweet that said, hey, I'm going to ask the Secretary of Treasury and the director of FHFA to think about releasing the GSEs from conservatorship, which that was out of left field. This was the last night at 10 o'clock. I happened to be watching TV show and that popped up. So all of a sudden, things that we all thought, okay, maybe next year, what does this mean? And what are the potential impacts? So we were, to be honest with you, really positive and telling a lot of our members that access to loans from Fannie and Freddie, they're open for business. I don't think that changes at all. People were, even Fannie Mae has talked about being positive about doing student housing loans. So I think the air was really positive for us. And I'm not sure this changes any of that, but it adds a question mark in terms of what does this mean? And where do we go with this, right? And, there's a lot of things that both the director and the secretary have been working on that had nothing to do with this, that all of a sudden, this is something huge and not a small thing to kind of go, oh yeah, we just need to write a little executive order and we get rid of it. So we don't know how to interpret this yet. This literally came out last night at 10 o'clock. So I think everybody's scrambling a little bit to gain an understanding of just what that means.
Yeah.
So the last thing I'll talk about from a federal government perspective, and that has to do with the Department of Education. So a lot of people have been asking about both foreign student application and what kind of impacts could be there. Probably more importantly, and again, things are playing themselves out a little bit, has to do with access to financing, right? So Department of Education, there have been many decades of discussion by the Republican Party that they want to get rid of the Department of Education. Just think it should be at the state and local level. However, they do manage and run a student loan program. And so they've already made some changes in terms of the kind of repayment features. It used to be this kind of plethora of different things. They've cut that down to 2, but they've also started to say, they laid off 50% of all the people who work at the Department of Education.
Right.
And they also looked at what's access to financing. If, you had plenty of people talking about FAFSA impact in the past couple of years when that rolled out. Well, this is, for instance, Pell Grant, which is also an access to financing. They cut 50% of the staff in the Pell department at Department of Education. So what impact that has, we don't know yet. The other thing they've talked about is moving some of the responsibilities of these loan programs to other agencies. And it's not like you walk across the street and say, I'm taking all my books with me in the system and whatever else. So as you can imagine, is causing a lot of uncertainty. So the one thing that we're monitoring to see kind of where they finally come out on all this is what are the impacts to the access to financing for students. And I think that's something that we will continue to monitor and look at. And I do think it potentially presents some of an issue because, we're in May. A lot of people are trying to finalize what that package for financing.
100%. I put out on LinkedIn yesterday. There's a survey that just came out from the National Association of Financial Aid Administrators, where, since March when they had the cutback, they are seeing students who are having, a really hard time of getting not only a straight answer, but no kind of direction as to how much and when they'll, end up getting financial aid distributions. And you know, I put it out on LinkedIn because I feel like the operators really need to be thinking about, how is that going to affect things this summer? Because most operators already have something in place where they can, student who's waiting on financial aid, they can defer that payment in some kind of way until, move in or have their rent, their lease term renewed and not have to owe, all or half of their first installment. And we may just need to get a little bit more flexible, or plan on getting a little bit more flexible with that this year based on what was coming out with that survey. So please keep us attuned to that.
No doubt. So one last thing, sometime in about 4 weeks from now, middle of June, we're going to open up registration for NMHC's fall student housing conference. It's going to be in Scottsdale, Arizona. So if you're a big fan of that area, highly encourage you to kind of put that on your calendar. That's going to run October 20th through the 22nd. There you go. Grand Hyatt in Scottsdale. Beautiful location. If you don't like Vegas, obviously, I think a lot of people really love Scottsdale. So we look forward to seeing you all out there. So that's it. I know you got a lot of other things on your plate. I'm going to step out.
Yeah, looking forward to it. And Dave, we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, Wes.
All right. Thanks. All right, guys, we've got a couple other industry events that that are coming up this summer that I want to make sure everybody is aware of. And by the way, you can find these on our website. If you go to the events page at studenthousinginsight.com, you can find all of these. But I wanted to bring up Brian from BizNow. BizNow's got a couple of things coming up between now and let's call it turn season.
We have a lot of events, that's for sure. I appreciate having me on.
Yeah. So 2 things that are coming up June 18th I want you to talk about, but you guys have had, this isn't your first foray into doing student housing events. You've had a long-standing one in Philadelphia that I've been to a couple of times. And it's a great fly in, fly out, especially if you're on the East Coast. But you guys have been expanding that this year. You had one in Austin earlier. I know there was one in California, Northern California, just a couple of weeks ago. But tell us a little bit about what's coming up this summer.
So that's a good intro. Just quickly, if you're not familiar with our Orange or with BizNow in general, what we do, the organization that I represent here with BizNow, we serve the commercial real estate industry, and we do that in 2 main ways. We keep the industry informed. We have a whole team of reporters that are writing breaking news, what is relevant to commercial real estate professionals. We also connect the industry by hosting roughly 400 events a year. The way we do this, as you mentioned, we've really prioritized and perfected the local event model. So there's organizations out there that have tremendous events that we have a ton of respect for, where you go and you dedicate a week and you meet thousands of people, and those are fantastic. That is not the BizNow model. The BizNow model is you spend 3 to 5 hours of your day. You come, you meet a few hundred high-level commercial real estate individuals for that specific topic. Our student housing asset class, we've really leaned into. This has been there's a lot going on in this sector that we can cover, that there's been a lot of interest in. You mentioned Austin, you mentioned Philadelphia. That's actually where I sit. So if you come to that event, please make sure you come and shake my hand. The 3 events that are on the screen right now, we have an event in Raleigh, we have one in Los Angeles, and one in Atlanta. The topics that are covered at these events, we'll talk about development, we'll talk about financing, operations, how are you leasing your properties. You'll meet owners, developers, operators, you'll meet lenders, GPs, LPs, investors. You'll meet all the way down to the people that are cleaning the rooms. So we encourage you to come out. We encourage you to look at our events. And again, appreciate you having me on.
No, thanks so much. And we've got a couple of things. One, I wanted to make sure everybody knew how to just find it's obviously biznow.com. You go to their events page. You can just hit on all topics, go to student housing, and boom, you've got those 3 that are coming up. You guys are still planning on doing the Philadelphia one in October timeframe?
Philadelphia comes up in October. We make sure we scour the internet and make sure we don't compete with any of the other big players. So you can.
You saw an NMHC, is that right?
Oh,
you
yeah,
right?
we respect them. I'll probably be at that event as well. But we make sure we stay away from that. This is more of a localized opportunity. The Philadelphia event, October. We have an event in London in October. We have a national webinar coming up in September, and we're going to end the year with this asset class and a university and student housing event in New York City.
Great.
Yeah.
And again, we just established a partnership with you guys as well. So anybody that goes to, again, studenthousinginsight.com and go to the events page, they're all listed there. There's also a code, SHI Partners. It's probably a little hard for everybody to see, but do that and you get a discount off the registration. And registration's like, I mean, gosh, what was it like?
We keep it
$109 in Raleigh. I mean,
exactly. Yeah. And you know what? I talked to my marketing team before I jumped on, and we upped that to a 20% discount for all events. So I get a little bit of a nicer discount. I hope to see your audience out there.
Well, great. Well, we've got one more event that we want to talk about with College Pads and Star Res. But Brian, thanks so much, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Chris, how are you?
I'm great, Wes. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Sweating a little bit here because Dave went a little bit longer than planning. So I'm trying to figure out in my head how we're going to switch this around, make sure we get caught up. But I wanted to talk about an event that I've been involved with you guys for the past couple of years. I had to back out last minute last year because my wife had to have some surgery, but looking to get back with you guys again and seeing you guys in Denver, but it's going to be a little different this year. So you want to, number one, congrats on the acquisition by Star Res, which is giving you guys kind of a great opportunity to combine these two events.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Yeah, we've had a ton going on since our recent acquisition where we were acquired by Star Res, who's kind of the leader in the on-campus software space across the country. They work with housing providers across the country, and it's really exciting to kind of be able to support students throughout the entire journey, both on campus when they're living in the dorms and then when they're ready to transition to the off-campus side of things. So yes, this year is going to be a little bit different. This is probably our 5th off-campus summit that we've run, where we bring together student or university officials across the country to get together to talk about best practices, supporting students when they're getting ready to transition to finding a place off campus. And it's a unique conference. It's normally pretty intimate, less than 100 people, I would say. But this year, now that we're a part of Star Res, we'll be kind of merging their Global Connect conference that is normally about 1,000 university officials from across the country together. And so, yeah, it's going to have a bit of a different feel, but we're super excited to kind of have our off-campus track where we'll have a bunch of awesome speakers, including yourself, and the off-campus panel that is typically one of the most talked about conversations we have. So appreciate you being there and bringing the group together again. Yeah,
I'm excited. This is I think this is the first one that Charlie Matthews at College House is going to be able to be a part of. They were there 2 years ago, or maybe it was 3 years ago when you guys did one in Atlanta, but he had to send someone else to do it. So looking forward to him speaking with a lot of the higher ed folks and kind of how they look at that data as well. So, well, fantastic. Again, if folks want more info, they can simply go to, it is Off-Campus Summit. If I can get it up here on the screen, offcampussummit.com. And yeah, it's as easy as that.
You got it. Thanks, Wes. Appreciate you having me on.
All right, Chris, take care.
Take care.
All right, I am going to call a quick audible really quick. And there was one other opportunity that's coming up. It's our Lunch and Learn that we're having next Thursday with Opinion. If you're an Opinion client, you definitely want to be a part of it because we're going over some new product stuff. We'll get an email blast out on that. I want to call an audible really quick and switch to our topic of the month, which is mental health awareness. So if you tuned in to view the pre-leasing segment, we'll get to it. I'm going to push that to the end. But we've got a couple of folks that are on here that have got deadlines at the top of the hour that I want to make sure that we get to. So for those that are in the stage, go ahead and be prepared to get on. But ever since we started Shop Talk, we've made sure to take time in the month of May and let's celebrate Mental Health Awareness Month, and let's talk about what's happening within the industry to help not only our peers and our colleagues, but also our customers, our student residents, as well as the campus communities that we serve, and talk a little bit about some of the services that are available out there. And we've got some fantastic things that are going on. First thing I want to talk to everyone about is actually about a recent announcement between RoomSync and Counselor. And to help me with that, I'm bringing up Rob and Josh. How are you doing, guys?
Doing well. Thank you for having us.
Yeah. Hey,
Well,
sorry,
thank
my
you.
audio just came back in. Thank you for having us, Wes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I got this email blast. Josh, I was talking to each of you guys about something totally separate, but it was dealing with the same thing. And one of you said, yeah, we're actually about to announce a partnership.
Yeah.
And then I got the details of that partnership. And that was pretty crazy. Rob, did you say you couldn't hear?
Oh, well, I can hear you. So just
Okay.
worst case scenario, I'm happy to cover for both of us.
Well, let's jump
Yeah.
into it.
Might have to do that. I can't hear a thing. So go ahead, Josh.
No problem. Well, I guess excited to introduce this on both Rob and my behalf. And Wes, thank you again for having us on. Wes and I think we connected a long time ago at this point, talking about a lot of different opportunities and maybe just a quick bit of background on Counselor and on RoomSync. So RoomSync, probably the leader in college roommate matching. Fantastic app and program that works with buildings to help roommates find each other and match with the best possible fit. At Counselor, we work with organizations of all shapes and sizes with a particular focus on students to help them deal with the day-to-day mental health challenges that they face going throughout their lives. Those things like I'm stressed about school, I'm having a tough time with a boyfriend, a girlfriend, whatever it might be. And Rob and I were connected actually through a mutual connection at Cardinal Group a long time ago, with the general idea that we both are supporting a very similar audience in very different ways, and maybe there's an opportunity to partner up. And after about a year of discussion, Rob and I finally landed on something that we thought made a whole lot of sense in the context of student housing, which we are now calling the Fall Pass. And so if you wouldn't mind jumping ahead, the Fall Pass is something that we built to address what Rob and I refer to as the transition crunch, which takes place at the beginning of every school year. Moving in with someone new, living in a new town, starting new classes. What we're all quite familiar with, especially you all who work in the student housing space every day and every year. The beginning of the school year is incredibly stressful for a whole lot of folks. And so what we designed was a purpose-built program that allows student housing facilities to offer mental health support to their residents during the first, actually throughout the entire year, but with an elevated level of support during the fall, during the first 3 months of the school year. And so essentially the way it works is if a building subscribes to the Fall Pass, every resident in that building can text with a licensed mental health professional 24/7 on demand or by appointment for the first 90 days of the school year. And throughout the entire rest of the school year, individuals who have access to the Fall Pass can access our in-app wellness toolkit resources. And so these are self-guided resources that one can use on their own time. They cover what we deem to be the building blocks of wellness. So these are resources which support relaxation, nutrition, fitness, sleep, habit building, and organizational skills. Resources you can use on your own time outside of those sessions with licensed counselors, just in case you need to take a moment and breathe. It's a text-based service very intentionally. Very challenging to have a video session when you want to talk about your roommate and they're laying in the bed next to you or maybe in the room right next to you. So, the convenience and the confidentiality to be able to pull out your phone, text with a counselor in the moment to deal with those issues that might be bugging you, hugely empowering for so many people who otherwise could not or would not have sought support. Rob and I are formally making the fall pass available to student housing buildings for the upcoming school year in the fall. And buildings can subscribe to give access to their residents to the extent that they'd like to offer what we think is a pretty incredible amenity and one which is quite unique compared to what else is offered in the space so far. Really appreciative with Mental Health Awareness Month being what it is right now to have the opportunity to talk about this with you all.
Yeah, and I can hear everyone now, and I'll jump in with just a little bit, which is, I think we were connected, and the reason was we were thinking internally about, roommate matching happens during the set window of time where people are self-selecting, but at some point in the summer, RoomSync pretty much shuts down, and the screen says, "Sorry, the network is closed. You'll hear about your roommate soon. Stay tuned," and they're excited for that. But we think, is there some other way that we can use this real estate that people are going into and seeing that the network's closed, but could we promote something else, some other meaningful service in that view? And that's, I think, where we leaned on the experience of some of our customer advisory board members, and they pointed us and connected us with Josh on that. And I think this makes a ton of sense in pointing to the transition crunch that Josh mentioned, that we do think that this really is this critical 3 months post move, and where you're dealing with roommate conflicts, where you're dealing with new classes, new cities. It's a opportunity for this minimum effective dose. So I think that mental health counseling can happen all year round, but if we were to pick a point in time where you're most likely to experience these challenges, I think the fall move-in period is that time. And that's why we want to target this with this collaboration.
No, I mean, that's fantastic. And after that 3-month period, they still have the self-help portion of it. Are they able to buy a subscription if that's what they want to do? And how does that work?
Yeah, so absolutely they can. If someone gets really comfortable with the service and they want to keep texting with a counselor, they can subscribe on their own. We do also offer, and our standard model is a 12-month service package where people can access text-based support from licensed counselors all year round. So to the extent that a building wanted to offer a full 12 months, that's also an option. But exactly to Rob's point, if we could offer, frankly, as affordable and pointed of a solution as possible to really pinpoint, especially in the context of student housing, when are people feeling that crunch, so to speak? It really was, and all of the data supports it, both in the usage data that we have. We've been working with tens of thousands of students throughout the United States, and our busiest time of year always happens to be in the fall, and should be no surprise to all of us based on the major transitions taking place for everyone in that period.
Yeah. I may just add one other point is we are talking a lot about the student, rightly so, with mental health, but let's also talk about the providers of the support of the mental health. And in the case where maybe something like a counselor doesn't exist, that might fall on the leasing teams, maybe someone who's working at the property as a part-time job as a college student and may not have a whole lot of training on dealing with mental health issues. I think that can also be a big challenge for teams that are trying to do a lot of things on the property, not just support their residents with their mental health. And that's where I think something like this can also come in, is take maybe some of that off of the on-site team so they can focus on other aspects of their job, and leave it to the professionals, leave it to the licensed professionals in a sense.
Well, fantastic. I mean, Rob, you've been in this industry, helping us with roommate matching for a long period of time, and it was one thing to go from room bug to room.
I was going to say, this is the point where you say room bug. I know it's coming, man. I know it's coming every time I'm on here.
But no, this partnership is fantastic. Josh, we met several years ago, and I was like, this makes a whole lot of sense. I think it's probably more so on the institution side, and I know that's what you're going after really, really hard. But it's been fantastic to see some of the relationships that you've done on the off-campus world to get this resource into so many students' hands. So thanks so much for what you guys are doing.
Yep.
Thank you
for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Great. And for current RoomSync clients, I guess this is all going to happen automatically for them, Rob, or is there something specific that that a client has to do.
So this would be an opt-in process. If clients are interested in opting in,
Gotcha.
they can reach out to us to get that set up and discuss the pricing on that.
Gotcha. And for whatever reason they're not using Room Sync, Josh, you got your website there. It's counselor without the e.com. And thanks so much for joining, guys.
Yeah, thanks
Appreciate it.
again
Thank you for having us.
All right, guys. Let's switch to the next part of our mental health topic for this month, and that is getting an update from this fantastic organization that was started by the operators within our industry back in 2020, and their partnership with the How Are You Foundation, and that's the College Student Mental Wellness Advocacy Coalition, which Richie is a part of. And lost Robert here. Let me see if I can find him. There we go. And Robert with How Are You Project. So Richie, I want to hand it off to you. I've got your slide deck here. So, but if you want to introduce Robert, because I think this is Robert's first time on Shop Talk, so it's probably good for the audience to know who he is.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Wes, and always appreciate you having us on this time of year. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Richie Lasik, Director of Innovation at Core Spaces. I'm one of the leadership team members on the coalition here. And so we have Robert joining us today after I go through our update, what we're doing, how you can get involved. Robert's going to go in and talk more about the How Are You project, but I've had the pleasure to get to know Robert over the past few years here, and he's a huge driver into what we actually do in terms of implementing resources and our strategy around mental health. So Robert, I'll give you an opportunity to share a little bit about you.
I appreciate that. Hey, everyone. I'm Robert Sanchez. I'm the Executive Director of the How Are You Project. We do have a few slides that will talk a little bit about our organization and some of the services that we provide, and then go a little bit deeper into some of the content that we've just recently launched. So
Great.
I know we're trying to get back on track, so I'll just leave it at that. Let Richie go back into an update on the coalition, and then we'll talk a little bit about the project towards the end.
Sweet. Next time we do this, by the way, I'll get one of those How Are You flat brim hats. Those are sweet. Gotta add that to my repertoire. So just a level set for those of you that don't know about the coalition, you can see here, got quite a few people across the industry that are now involved. So that's actually 29 logos that you're looking at that are part of the coalition. So just high level, 3 years ago, came together during COVID, and we realized that, mental health resources and amenities, it should not be a value prop to one company. It really should be something that we should come together, figure out, and problem solve as an industry. And so that's what we've been doing the last 3 years. I'm on the leadership team with 7 other companies like ACC and Cardinal. And so, really what we've done over the past 3 years is how do we get resources into our team members and residents' hands as quickly as possible? And so, the first thing that we realize is that, suicides, overdoses, mental health episodes, that's not just going to stop because we all said we're joining together to be a coalition, right? That's not just going to automatically stop. So when you think of prevention versus postvention, we wanted to focus on postvention because we knew incidents were going to continue to happen. And so as you can see here, what we have on the screen, this was the first resource that we released. And so for those of you that are part of the coalition, just reminding you, this is what you have as being part of the coalition is the postvention toolkit. So this is actually a guidebook that we created in partnership with the JED Foundation, who we had on this podcast actually the last couple of years to talk about, our partnership with them. They work with over 450 colleges, 600 high schools to work on putting, mental health awareness, suicide prevention, policies within their structure, within their system. So they did the same thing with us. They did research on our industry. So this is a resource curated specifically for property managers on what do you do after a suicide at your property. We just experienced one recently in our portfolio at Core Spaces, and that's something where we were able to send that out. I know we had that tragedy at FSU, last month, and that we were able to send those resources out that afternoon just to remind everyone. So as part of being in the coalition, what do you get exclusive to you is we have a video from the Senior Clinical Director of JED Foundation walking you through what to do and walking through the guidebook. And it's a tremendous resource. So that's the first one that's available, and just a reminder of what we do to help people that are part of the coalition. Our second one here, and Robert will get more into it, so I don't want to steal most of his thunder. But we have the peer-to-peer support videos. This was an incredible seven-part short series vignette videos. You can see 2 of them here, identifying someone in need, support through crisis, where we actually spent a lot of time really understanding what our college students need when you look at the challenges with mental health. Because every year, we send a survey out to our combined portfolio, really trying to understand what are those pain points, and then how can we come up with resources to help solve those. And so the videos here were curated specifically with our students living off campus in mind. And so,
yeah, it's a fantastic tool. Absolutely fantastic.
The production team did an incredible job. So these resources are publicly available. Like I said, Rob will get more into it. The next slide we have here is more of the exclusive to the coalition. We have these companion guides or training guides for your teams, right? So as part of being the coalition, not only do you have the publicly accessible videos, but you have a very thoughtfully curated guide for your property manager to get trained on how to actually carry out, the learnings from these videos at their community. Same goes for your community concierge, your community assistants, right? The student workers. So really a tremendous resource, again, specifically curated for the off-campus industry. And so those are the 2 resources we have, released to date. And so our focus going into the rest of this year, obviously, as we're celebrating Mental Health Awareness Month, is this fall, we're going to be doing our next Thriving Student Indexed. And so I talked about survey data briefly here a moment ago. The Thriving Student Indexes are now biannual effort to understand the mental health trends in the off-campus space, right? So this year, we're going to have around 900,000 students filling this out, the opportunity to fill this out. So hopefully, we get a nice capture rate out of those 900,000 students to really understand what are those trends we're seeing. This will be our 3rd survey we've done since we became a coalition. And so for all of you on this call here that are part of the coalition, you'll be getting your own mental health survey file, right? In addition to understanding the national trends. The other 2 things we're focusing on this year is growing our partner base. And so I thought it was super cool to hear from, Josh and Rob about their partnership we're doing with Counselor and Room Sync. We need help raising money so we can pay for stuff like that.
Yeah.
Right? So what you just saw, like the High Hawaii peer-to-peer videos, the Jet Foundation guidebook, it ain't free, right?
Yeah,
so as part of being the coalition, our operators pay an annual fee. Most of that goes to the survey instrument and actually getting that out and collecting the data. We still need money to actually pay for resources. And so we're really excited to now be able to open up our membership to vendors and capital partners in space, not just operators. And so that's really our 2-pronged focus this year, in addition to the survey, is really, getting more sponsorship from, the awesome vendors and capital partners in space, but also just getting more resources in the hands of team members and residents, right? And so hopefully next year, Wes, when we're on in 12 months for Mental Health Awareness Month, we have a couple more resources that we can brag about. But before I pass it off to Robert, just sharing with you the benefits you actually get from being part of the coalition if you are a vendor or a capital partner. And so tier 3 is that entry-level tier, where if you're interested in supporting college student mental health, right, starting at $1,000, right, this is what you get in terms of benefits. We've also talked to some really awesome vendors in the space that, depending on the type of service they provide to student housing operators, we can work out a donation in kind deal, right? Where maybe part of your service is getting our mission out there, our resources out there through your technology. We can work out a donation in kind, but please scan this QR code if you want to get involved. We're really excited about bringing on some people outside of just a student housing operator cohort to really start bolstering up our reach, but most importantly, getting the funds to pay for resources so we can start really helping people. So really grateful for the, companies on this call that helped us actually pay for the, peer-to-peer support videos, help us pay for the Jet Foundation guidebook. But again, right, we're here to really continue to grow our base. And that starts with really bringing in, the companies on this call and in this industry that are really passionate and want to put their money where their mouth is. And so, like I said, Wes, hopefully next year, we're going to have litany of more resources. So last thing
and I was just going to say, I mean, this is great having this tier 2, not just for the vendors and suppliers to the space, but for a lot of the smaller operators, that the amount that the other national operators put in at the beginning of this thing and have committed to, that's a little bit out of reach for a lot of these regional or single market operators, and this certainly allows them to participate in it, and I think that's fantastic.
100%. That's a great point. Making impact for the smaller operators is something that we want to continue to grow. Like we had some really awesome conversations that interface with a few smaller operators that are only operating under 1,000 beds, and had the ability to leverage someone like the coalition, and some larger operators that have those resources in place can really help as smaller operators continue to build their portfolios and figure out how to best care for their team members and residents. And so last thing I'll say here is that as you can see on the bottom, one of the benefits that we have for being a partner is that we're going to start creating these like ribbons, right, that you can wear at the coalition to show that you support student mental health. And so, Wes, I know you're going to talk about this later, but at NMHC this fall, we're going to have our first in-person fundraiser to really, encourage some donation dollars here for the coalition. And it'll be a great way for us to raise through who is our primary nonprofit, Hi, How Are You project. And, hopefully Robert will have you there so we can all be together. But also wanted to share what Hi, How Are You is doing this spring, and remind all of you operators about the resources that Hi, How Are You can provide in terms of celebrating Mental Health Awareness Month.
Well, and really quick, if you don't mind, I'll just go ahead and bring that slide up. We've been doing this annual Topgolf mixer for the past couple of years at NMHC, and I've always had a great turnout, and it's been a fantastic event. I didn't know if we would be doing anything in Scottsdale or not. There just happens to be a Topgolf like 2 miles down the road from the resort. So reached out to them, and in talking with them, they've got some fantastic things to be able to structure fundraisers as well. And I said, you know what, we need to have a conversation with Richie and the coalition, and let's make this a fundraiser. So for sponsors, a portion of it goes to the Hi, How Are You Foundation, and then we've also got a silent auction. So for folks that want to donate something, I think it's got to have like a minimum $300 market value. But if they want to donate something to be auctioned off, 100% of that goes to the Hi, How Are You Foundation. So anyway, just wanted to sneak that in there as well. We'll be sending out more information on it. We've got the sponsorship kit ready for that. So I'll be sending that out to all of you guys in the weeks to come. Robert.
Yeah.
There may be some people that don't know about How Are You project.
Right. So, well, before I launch into that, let me just say that we're honored to be the beneficiary of your fundraiser. We really do appreciate it. Every little bit helps. As Richie mentioned, we've got a lot going on. We have a huge need for content, and that content comes with a price tag. So any money that we can raise is incredibly helpful. But as I mentioned, I'm the executive director of the Hi, How Are You project, and we are an Austin-based nonprofit, similar to Counselor, in that we are focused on college students' mental health. Probably a little bit different in Counselor, that I would say we're probably more upstream in that we don't provide licensed therapy of any sort. So we are preventative, and we have a mission of providing college students with best practices and tips, things that they can implement into their daily lives to really put them in the best possible position to effectively manage their mental health and well-being during their time on campus. And we do that primarily through content, through events, and through community building programs. The name was inspired by a very famous mural in Austin that was painted in the early 90s by a musician and artist named Daniel Johnston. And in addition to being a prolific songwriter and graphic artist, Daniel suffered from severe mental illness. But he always maintained that you can really get to the truth of how someone's doing by simply just asking them, "How are you?"
Yeah.
And with real intention, not being satisfied with the initial response and really probing. And so his longtime manager and good friend Tom Gimbel and his wife Courtney started the foundation in 2018 to honor Daniel and his legacy, but also carry forth just that simple notion of reaching out to someone and asking how you're doing. So
Yeah. And there's, for those that want to know, kind of more of the story behind Daniel, there's a great documentary out on Amazon Prime. I think I bought it a year or two ago, and it's
called The Devil and Daniel Johnston. It's heavy, no doubt, but it does show perseverance and what it's like to work through things like that.
Yeah.
So if you go to the next slide, there's several statistics that really keep our mission relevant. I would say this top one here of 75% of lifetime cases of mental health issues begin by the age of 24 just really emphasizes the importance of establishing strong mental health best practices early in life. And so we try to do that with our content and with the resources that we provide through our website and through the coalition. So this right here is just it's a snapshot of a few things that, of course, they're trending in a direction that we don't want to see, but it does make what we do very relevant. This is the why for what we do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then Richie touched on a couple of resources with the JED Foundation and with the peer-to-peer videos. I would say number 3 is what we call Happy Habits. And we really just take all of the content that I mentioned and we roll it up under a heading of Happy Habits. And these are really just 6 science-based practices that form a roadmap, if you will, for feeling connected and balanced and resilient when you're on campus. Those 6 topics are there listed on the left-hand side. And then on the right-hand side, you can see where it's just a snapshot of how we go a little deeper in each of those topics and the resources that we provide students. So these are articles, they're topic-specific videos, podcasts, and lastly, and most importantly, tools. What we heard from the survey was the students said, this is all really interesting. We appreciate that you're giving attention to our mental health, but you got to give us some tools, some things that we can put into practice. And that's what that tools section is meant to be. So this is a living, breathing repository. We are constantly updating it, keeping the information fresh and relevant. But that really, is what we do. And we're funded by this coalition. So these are our providers, and we act almost as a mental health agency for each of the members. So there's a tremendous benefit to that membership.
Well, guys, thanks so much. And again, for those that want to get more information, there's a QR code there. Richie, any other final words?
I think going off what Robert just said earlier about just the resources is that, as you're celebrating Mental Health Awareness Month, I think the biggest thing is just talk about it, right? Ask questions. It's simple. How do you help someone else? It's talk about it. How are you? Show that you care, show that you're aware, right? And it starts as simple as that, and it can turn into a lot of other amazing things that can help point someone's life into a different direction. So, Wes, thank you, and excited to see kind of what interest we get here from the audience in terms of joining. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and folks, if you've got colleagues and other friends that weren't joining in for this, our registration was a little low this month, and I think that's mostly because everybody's on vacation or dealing with graduations and all that kind of stuff. But this will be on our YouTube channel within, probably over the weekend sometime, if not before. So make sure you share that with them. Guys, thanks so much. I am now going to play a pre-recorded
pre-leasing segment that we did on Tuesday with both obviously Charlie at College House, who updates us each month with how the industry's doing from a pre-leasing standpoint. And then also we've got kind of a recap of and a forecast from the finance and investment side with Will Baker and from Walker Dunlop, and then Greg Marks from Northmark. So I'm going to play that now. Thanks so much, guys. Charlie, how's it going?
How are we?
I've got a little bit of FOMO going on. We're having to record this on Tuesday because you're headed to the Bahamas for a fishing trip. I'm jealous, I gotta say.
It's normally we do the May one on Tuesday. I tried to account for that, but I have a 4-month-old nephew who is going to be down there. So wherever he is,
Oh yeah, it's all about the 4-month nephew, right? Not the fishing at all, right?
Not at all. Oh, no, but no, we're good. And I appreciate you accommodating. This would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a couple of guests that we're going to bring on in just a minute and kind of talk about what's happening from investment and brokerage side. I want to touch base on that, what's happened over the first quarter, kind of what their outlook looks like moving forward. But a lot of that depends on the performance of the asset class, and you're the guy with the numbers. So let's talk about how things ended at the end of the semester. I think this information is from Monday the 19th. Is that right?
Yeah, Monday the 19th. So we've actually made up some ground from the last time we spoke. If you tuned in April or you're at the Interface Conference, the industry is about 2% give or take behind. That has now contracted where it's only about 40 basis points behind. You're seeing actually the Southeast here at 79.4, about 20 basis points ahead. So give or take, relatively on par with the previous year. And the highlight here is actually the Southwest. If you, I guess, many a shop talk ago, handful of months, that delta between the two is roughly about, say max was about 4%, 4.3%. It's now down to 2.1, which is encouraging. So you're seeing a lot of that delta being made up. I guess the Northeast is kind of the loss leader here, about 3.7% behind. And then the West, which is always traditionally a little bit later from a standpoint of the leasing cycle kicking off, it's about a point behind, same with the Midwest. So overall, we're seeing a lot of contraction from a standpoint of the year over year, which is positive from a standpoint of increase in velocity from a national perspective.
Gotcha.
Really what's standing out here is, this number has stayed at like 106, 107 for the last couple months. We haven't really seen much from a standpoint of rates. I've actually seen a lot more drop. I think it's a little bit of some scars from last year, being more proactive than reactive, where you saw a little bit of a tempered summer from a leasing perspective that ultimately, again, filled up. I think the industry was about a point behind last year from an occupancy perspective. But I feel as though there's a lot more understanding that properties don't want to be in the same position they were last year and enjoy their summer is the short and sweet of it.
Right.
So definitely some conservative measures to make sure in the heads and beds mentality.
Let's talk a little bit about floor plans. And
yes, but I'll highlight really more on the smaller floor plan types. One of the big things that continually hear, the world's expensive, affordability. You're seeing, and again, this will add more context when we look at the rate slide on the next one. But from the 3s, 4s, and 5s and 6s, basis points behind, or from a 6 bedrooms ahead. Again, there's not a lot of 6 bedrooms, transparently, in student housing, more of a newer product type or cottage product, if you will. But for the studios and 1s being the furthest behind, those are the most expensive floor plan types. Where again, your 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s, again, you economies of scale there from a rate per bed perspective are much lower. The studio is actually more expensive than the 1 bedroom. A lot of the studios fall in that newer inventory,
right?
Your high-rise urban infill deals, where the studios were 3% behind, the 1 bedrooms were 1.9% behind. Generally speaking, $30 a month off from a national perspective for the 1 bedrooms, where your 3 bedrooms are actually leading the pack outside of the 6. There's just not a lot of them, but your average rate is actually lower than the 4s. From a 2 bedroom to a 3 bedroom, you have about $170 difference monthly. Math that out, almost $2,000 annually from a rents perspective. You're seeing the 3 bedrooms outperform the 2s. So definitely seeing some pushes to the affordability side as it relates to the larger floor plans being in higher demand than some of the smaller ones.
Great. One question on the 1 bedrooms. I'm seeing in a lot of metro areas, the 1 bedrooms, having dual occupancy in the bedroom, and they're charging a little bit more of a premium for that, how they're actually accounting for it in their property management software as far as it being a true premium add-on or if it's just baked into their rental rate offerings. That's a kind of a company by company kind of thing. But any idea on how much of what you guys pulling and looking at, does that include the double occupancy premium or no?
The big challenge is that a lot of these give options, right? So you give a private or a double. If it's a pure double, obviously it'll be broken out there. I would say, holistically speaking, I'm seeing some of that, but it's more of an option versus like, hey, this is truly a 1-1 double occupancy.
Yeah.
What I am seeing more of is, and it's really hard from a data perspective, but it's a 3-bedroom or 4-bedroom or 5-bedroom where there's 3 private rooms and then maybe 1 is double occupancy. That's the real curveball. But, a lot of these newer developments, especially from a density perspective, you are seeing more frequent floor plan types that have that double occupancy. And, the premiums, it all market dependent, but most of the time seeing anywhere from 15 to 20% if you were to,
Gotcha.
I guess, double the double rate and then looking from a private perspective. It just depends, market specific.
Gotcha. Well, hey, I want to move to our guests that we're bringing on. Last month we were at Interface, and Interface is always kind of, in the month of April is always that kind of telltale of folks meeting and saying, okay, are we going to try to sell this year, after turn, or how are we going to approach that? And so May is kind of the perfect month to talk to the guys on the transaction side and the finance side to see where things are headed, what may have traded in the first quarter, first 4 months. And so with that, I wanted to go ahead and bring on Will Baker from Walker & Dunlop and Greg Marks from Northmark. And that's a general introduction there, guys, but I think it'd probably be wise for us just to make sure that folks know who you guys are and what you do. So Greg, this is your first time to Shop Talk, so we'll let you do a proper introduction.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Wes. Yeah, so recently joined Northmark. It's a relatively new vertical as it relates to student housing. I'm a partner on the platform and cover investment sales advisory, but then also capital markets. So a lot of debt and equity raising, which has been more of the bulk of our time as of late.
Great. And Will, you're no stranger to Shop Talk, and appreciate you always being willing to come on and talk about what your perspective of the industry is.
Yeah, thanks for having me back. For those that don't know me, Will Baker with Walker & Dunlop. I cover the capital markets and financing side for student housing here, and it's typically primarily been on the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac side over the last 2 or 3 years, certainly expanded to the capital markets. And so we're casting a pretty wide net on every deal we're looking at right now, just given the number of lenders in the student housing sector.
Yeah. So let's just take a quick look back. I want to kind of get your perspective on some things. I know here in the past few weeks, we've seen Landmark buying a couple of deals out in Los Angeles, and I think Core Spaces has picked up a few in the past few weeks. But overall, what was kind of your opinion and any kind of highlights or lowlights of what happened the first 4 months of the year so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think overall, marginally, it's more kind of on pace with 24. I mean, 24 obviously was a little up from 23, which was a low point for the sector for a variety of reasons. The first quarter, honestly, from a rates perspective, was kind of tough. I saw the 10-year get up into the 4.6s, and it just kind of moved around above 4.5 for a lot of January and February, settled back down in March. And then as we got to Interface in April, we had the tariff announcement, which kind of spooked the market a little bit, dropped the treasuries down to 3.8 for a hot second, then back up to, close to 4.5, and then it settled back to 4.3. So it's been all over the place, and it's really created a lot of challenges for buyers to really pinpoint their cost of debt for a 60-day due diligence period right now. And so right now in the current environment, I just think borrowers are very focused on every basis point. Every basis point matters. Anytime you see any small rally in treasuries, even 10 or 15 basis points, that's going to really potentially spur activity a little bit. And so we're sitting, I think just a bit shy of 4.5 on the 10-year right now. We'll see what happens. I mean, there's a lot of talk from the Fed on whether or not we'll see any cuts this year based on some of the inflation prints. It's a little unclear. I think a lot of people are still thinking at least one. Maybe 2, we'll see. And that potentially could help us on the treasuries, but it's up a little bit. I mean, Interface was a little slower than some of us wanted it to be as far as just pure number of deals for sale. There were some, but it's not as much as there have been traditionally. I think it's already picked up a bit since then in the first part of April coming in. I think a lot of people were waiting for lease ups to kind of catch up a little bit. And as Charlie, has shown us that it has caught up. And so now that a lot of these deals have leased up to where they need to be coming into the summertime, more buyers more confident going under contract, knowing that the next year's rents will be there. So I think it will be a busy summer because the lease ups are there. We're seeing rent growth kind of 3 to 5%, kind of back to normal rates. And so I'm optimistic we'll have a strong close to the year.
Great. Greg, how about from your perspective? Obviously, you're new to Northmart, but not new to the student housing industry.
Yeah, I tend to echo everything Will had said. I think one piece of information is that, with the seasonality of student housing, obviously you're going to see an abundance of transactions occur through Q3 all the way through Q4. But I think there's a lot of sellers that are more so just waiting it out right now to come to market in the middle of summer, just so they can get credit for their rent growth and occupancy if they want to go through a Fannie or Freddie route and get higher proceeds than what they would otherwise get in today's baked rent roll. Furthermore, it seems like the general theme as of late has just been a lot of groups wanting to recap, particularly on the portfolio side. I mean, you've seen Price that has been doing several recaps over the past 12 months, and Vesper, and there's several other groups that have been working that angle. And I think the thought process is that if these assets are cash flowing and you're getting very strong dividends, there's no immediate need to sell, then why not bring in a fresh equity partner, deploy some capital as far as improvements, generate additional return on costs from those improvements, and then continue to ride the cash flow, providing that, you're still in an attractive market with, favorable supply demand fundamentals.
So talk about that a little bit. I mean, what's kind of some of the questions that's forcing that? Is it loan maturity that's coming up? Is it more so the demand for capital improvements that are putting those recaps together, or is it just a combination of it all?
I think it's kind of a combination of all of that, with factoring in that, a lot of these deals, at least that I'm seeing, have been held for 5 to 7 years. So transaction volume obviously was down from COVID, but pre-COVID 2019, even beginning of 2020, you saw an abundance of transaction volume. So you're kind of getting to the end of that life. And obviously there's a lot of promotes that want to be crystallized at this point, and even funds that, are looking to close out that particular opportunity.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think, like Greg said, a lot of the equity providers, they've seen the business plan be executed and they're ready to move on to the next deal, whereas the operators are looking at the sector and like, hold on a second, we're seeing supply come down dramatically in a lot of these big markets. We're seeing sort of a shift from students going from these smaller regional schools. They're all going to the flagship schools in the last 2 years. That's been a huge trend. And so if you're an operator, you're looking at this and saying, I got a lot of tailwinds coming in between enrollment spikes and supply going down. Why not stay in the deal and see some continued rent growth over the foreseeable future?
Question on that because if you've got an asset that's at a flagship, completely agree with you. On the other end of that, if you've got an asset, one of those schools that are seeing, the decline in enrollment, due to that, and they're facing loan maturities, we'll get into that in a second, but are there a lot of options out there for those owners right now?
Yes. I think there's probably at least twice the number of lenders in the student housing sector right now today than there were last year. There's been a surge of private credit lenders that have all entered the space. So big funds that maybe they were deploying equity into the space. Now, instead of equity, now they're deploying debt. And so there's a lot of debt funds, a lot of banks, a lot of new life insurance company lenders that have entered the space. Freddie Mac has been, a mainstay in the space for the last several years. Fannie Mae was before COVID, then they took a step back post-COVID. This year, they're back in the game. And so now we've got the agencies, we've got all these debt funds and more banks and more life insurance. So there's a lot of debt liquidity, a lot of options in the space. So if you are in one of those more regional, smaller tertiary markets, there are options. There may be, a slight cash in situation on your refinance to get to your UPB, but there are plenty of options. There's ways to structure around deals that are showing some challenges. And we financed a lot of those markets as well. We're working on several as we speak now. There's ways to mitigate the risk.
Yeah, I will also add that you're seeing credit unions step up as well.
Yeah.
Okay. I'd really like to dig into that more, but we're sensitive here on time. So I want to get to the next question. Will, we talked back in December, I guess it was, kind of forecasting the year. I think you said maybe it was $8 billion in loan maturity. It was a pretty high number. Have we gone through most of that? I imagine in student housing, because these deals always come up out of the ground and are occupied in August and September. I'm assuming that's going to be second or third and fourth quarter.
Yeah, I think the majority of that $8 billion in maturities will be in the back half of the year, and more specifically, even in Q4. And this is just when most of the student housing originations happen in general. Doesn't feel to me like a lot of those maturities have really transacted year to date so far. Some have. But the big question is just how many of these loans and lenders on the bank side are just going to, then maybe they're one of 3+1+1 that was originated in 22. When things were very different on the financing side. And so how many of those will be kicked for another year? If the deal's underwater, will the bank just, kick the can down the year for one more year and see if it does better next year? That certainly happened some on the conventional side. Coming into this year, there are a lot of people that felt this was kind of the year that banks are ready to be paid off and maybe less extensions. We'll see. We've not seen a lot of distress in the sector, which is a good thing. Whereas on the conventional side, we're seeing some markets where there's flat to declining rent growth based on the supply. Then the major flagship markets on the student side, we haven't seen that. You're still seeing rent growth down from last year and the year before, but at least we still have growth.
Gotcha. Charlie, any questions for these guys? Or you've got a lot of investors and folks on the finance side that are pinging you daily. So kind of interested in what you're hearing.
Everybody's wondering, on the supply side, I've seen a lot of newer entrants really on I think Greg mentioned on the recap side, like a lot of the institutions, I feel that were somewhat on the sidelines are back and trying to take the big swings at a lot of these, expanding out some of those core partnerships. But I'd say the biggest opportunity, I echo your sentiments, Will, on the operators wanting to stay in and seeing the tailwinds. A lot of developers, though. I'd say a lot of the supply is probably in like 10 or 15 markets right now. But starting to see some markets that hadn't had supply in a number of years start to either get approvals or the pipeline's opening up because there was such strong supply demand imbalances, more reactive versus proactive, from the planning commission. So, I don't think it's going to, obviously put a shovel on the ground. It's still another 2-3 years until you actually see that. So, the fundamentals are super strong. A 10-year could calm down a little bit. I think it'd be open season from a standpoint of volume perspective, but everyone I've talked to, from a deals perspective, there's normally a story, like either a fund maturity or, hey, we kicked it 2 years and, it's time to, crystallize that, promote different things. But from a straight asset sales, I think we're a little early from when you're starting to see that, call it end of June, early July, so we can get credit on those rent rolls from the agencies. I haven't had a negative conversation about the fundamentals of the space. There's definitely some question marks on some of these markets that have seen a run up in rents that have also been coupled with some multifamily supply. Long-winded way of saying, I echo, we got some tailwinds continuing. Debt's expensive, which makes the development side that much more challenging too, to change the scales from the supply-demand standpoint.
Will, quick question on the private debt that you mentioned earlier. Is that more short-term bridge?
A lot of people are just looking for short-term solutions. I think before COVID, the vast majority of financings we worked on was just the old bread and butter, 7 to 10 year fixed rate, put it to bed and just, collect your rent checks and hedge that interest rate risk with the fixed rate. These days, as everybody wants short-term floaters, if you're going to go fixed, it's 5-year max typically. And if you can get an extended prepay option, you get it. But 3-year, 3+1 or 2+1+1 type shorter term executions have been in high demand right now.
Gotcha. Well, guys, thanks so much for the update. We'll have you on probably in a couple more months. So thanks.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone.
Well, again, big thanks to those guys for being accommodating and allowing us to do that. Hey, guys, this went super long. I'm not going to keep you any longer, but I do want to just make sure that you know that our next Shop Talk for June will be June 24th, a little bit later, but just due to vacations and things like that, we're having to do that June 24th. And if you've gotten any value out of what we've covered here today, please make sure that you share it with your colleagues so they can get value out of it as well. They could do that by going to shoptalk.info and clicking down towards the bottom to register to receive our update so that they can get the invites each month to join Shop Talk. Thanks so much. Again, take care. Have a great Father's Day for the fathers that I won't be talking to until after Father's Day. And for everybody else, Have a great day.